Okay, I'm going to introduce today someone who was referred to us by editor Joyce Blumaker, and we're really excited to have her. Lydia Wayman is an autistic advocate with a BS in elementary education and an MA in English and nonfiction writing. Her writing has appeared in a wide range of online and printed publications, including several books. Her ongoing advocacy work includes mentoring youth with disabilities, presenting at events and conferences, and developing courses and training programs. In 2018, Lydia received the Autistic Advocacy Award from the Pittsburgh Center for Autistic Advocacy. She is the co-author of Snoopers and Sneakers, a middle grade mystery featuring an autistic main character. So, Lydia, welcome to the networking studio.
Thank you.
Is there anything I missed that I should have said?
I don't think so.
You don't think? Okay, okay. So because we're gonna follow a little bit of a different format. We just heard about you, or from me, but we're gonna hear about you in a second. But I would also like to introduce the other editors in the room. So I'm gonna go around, and this is where everybody gets really nervous. But I'm gonna call on you, and just please let Lydia know your name, what type of editor or what type of editing work you do, and where you're located, so she can also get a better sense of where our editors are from. So, Brittany Dowdle, I might start with you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for doing this today. I was really excited when I saw that Lydia would be here and what she'd be talking about. So my name is Brittany Dowdle, and I'm a full-time freelance editor based out of the North Georgia mountains. And I work primarily with publishers, and I do everything from like cold reading to proofreading to copy editing. So I've done other types of editing, but I kind of like that's where I'm at right now, what I'm enjoying right now.
Something I'd also really love to know from everyone is in terms of your editing work, if you have a particular genre, or even if not, just your like a genre of interest, something that interests you. It helps me, I don't know.
Sure. So for me, I I read and edit widely. So genres that I really enjoy, of course, science fiction, fantasy. I like historical, anything that has like strong female main characters, I enjoy. And then for nonfiction, I tend to do I guess, a decent amount of non of like memoir, oftentimes involving a certain amount of there's a lot of trauma and stuff like that can be found in memoir. So I tend to um, end up with books that need a little bit of a kind of a caring hand to walk them through the process.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Melissa, would you like to go next?
Hi, yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm Melissa Rudder. I am a developmental and copy editor from Los Angeles. I transitioned out of teaching high school, where I had a 18-year long career doing that, and now I'm editing. I primarily edit trade nonfiction and particularly enjoy narrative nonfiction and memoir.
Excellent. Darcy, would you like, oh, yeah, Darcy, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lydia. Really nice meeting you. I'm Darcy Gabriel. I'm based in Minneapolis, where I think it's currently like 1 degree. Um, so my background is I come from corporate communications and finance. And the last, well, I guess, year and a half, 2 years, I've been trying to build a copy editing business for myself. And I recently completed the UC San Diego copy editing program with Melissa. Welcome.
Great. And Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Hi, Lydia. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Yeah, my name is Adam Groves. I run Altria Editorial. I have been freelance editing for about 4 years now. I do both editing and copywriting, but primarily editing, developmental editing and copy editing. My main passion is memoir and personal narrative, although I also really enjoy and like to work on poetry and uh, haven't worked on speculative fiction yet. That could be fun sometime in the future. Literary fiction is also a real passion of mine. But in general, it's the memoir and personal narrative. And in particular, I really enjoy working with like young or early career writers, helping people find their voice and become empowered through telling their stories. So yeah.
Where are you
Wonderful.
located?
Oh, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and yeah, Darcy, represent the 1 degree crew. I've very cold here.
I was just telling Linda, I just mailed cookies to my best friend in Wauwatosa.
Oh, very cool. That's right up the road from where I live, not too far away.
Excellent. Maybe we need to get Adam on the list, on the cookie list. I like that. If you send one shipment, should send two. And for the record, so for me, Lydia, I work mainly in nonfiction, and I specialize also in memoir, in cookbooks, in gardening books, and I work with a lot of indie presses and with first-time authors. And I would say 50% of my work is helping authors go through the publishing route, doing whether it be author publishing or whether it be working with a hybrid publisher, so a lot of project management and author coaching as well. And one of the things that I've received a lot of work from, and Darcy, this goes to what we were talking in our previous meeting, that I don't advertise this, is I do a lot of translations of children's books into Spanish, and I review a lot of translations of children's books in Spanish, which is not something that I advertise, but it does come my way, most of it through word of mouth. And I actually have to say, I really, really enjoy it. Um, as a mom and as someone who's always curious about what's getting put out there in the literary world for children, I think it's great. So I had some questions for Lydia, and Lydia came back and she was like, I like your questions, but I have some other ones too that I want to talk about. And I really appreciated that because you shed some light on things that I felt were a given and that are not a given, and that we need to talk about. So, Lydia, I'm going to invite you. You sent me an email yesterday, which I really liked. And we talked, or you mentioned that you'd like to briefly discuss what we mean by neurodivergent. So, why I think that's a
Right.
great starting place.
Right. So it's really an umbrella, um, and encompasses it's an umbrella for people whose brains work atypically. And that's clearly vague and not well defined. And yes, that's kind of the idea. So exactly what diagnosis does and doesn't fall under that umbrella, I hate to say it, almost doesn't really matter. But it's a different kind of umbrella than diagnosis. It's because frankly, a lot of people who are neurodivergent have more than one diagnosis that will qualify. There's a lot of autism, ADHD. Um, I'm autistic. That's really the only diagnosis I have that would qualify. But autism, ADHD, learning disabilities like dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, a lot of time. Sometimes people with schizophrenia or bipolar will consider themselves neurodivergent. And it's really, it's if you will, not a gate kept kind of thing. If someone finds it a helpful way to frame what someone is telling you and saying that they're neurodivergent is that their brain processes information in a way that is atypical and that affects the way they interact with the world and with other people in daily life in some meaningful way. Um, and within the neurodivergent community, as broad as that is, you'll find we just kind of take people at their word. Nobody has to, show us their papers or anything. So I think it's a helpful word for in that for a lot of people it's not really clear. um those diagnoses they overlap and they interact and they and all of that, and so it's kind of stepping away from that and just saying, hey, my brain makes my life look a little different.
I love it. Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned is that there's a language around this, and that can you tell us a little about this disability language?
Yeah, there's kind of 2 points I wanted to touch on here. One is just because we are all editors, right? And I do editing work as well. I just kind of it's not really nothing's really a business for me. I just kind of do things that people ask me to do. I just kind of fell into it, but I still continue to do it. So I have experience on that end as well. And as editors, I want to point out there is the word neurodiverse and neurodiversity. That neurodiversity is sort of the concept, or the, if you will, it could be a theory, or it is the idea that there are a lot of different kinds of brains in the world. An individual person cannot be neurodiverse. They can't be diverse. They are one person. So the individual is neurodivergent. So whether you're using the language or in an editing context, that's something that catches my eye a lot and something to be aware of, that a lot of people miss. So that was one point on language. Another point is kind of totally different angle, but still about language. A lot of in professional contexts, so educators, medical professionals, social workers, they are taught to use something called person first language. You may have heard this along the way, the idea that someone is a person with condition, disability, diagnosis, person with autism, person with a disability, and that it's the idea being they're a person first, and we don't want to put whatever they're diagnosed with ahead of the fact that they're a person. And there are sometimes that is not untrue. There are groups where that is very strongly the way, the preference. There are other subgroups where autism is the example here. Identity first language is actually pretty strongly preferred. There are no absolutes here, by the way. So identity first language is saying autistic person. And the thinking here is we tend to use person first language, broadly speaking, when we are with things that are temporary, like saying I have or person with is kind of, it's that same separation. It puts that same separation. So we clump this together. I have a cold. Or something that we can separate from ourselves. Like, I happen to have type 1 diabetes. So I say I have, or I'm a person with type 1 diabetes, maybe. Or things that we see as negative. I have cancer. And so something like autism, it's different, right? It's more like your nationality or your gender, or something else that really can't be separated from who you are. It colors everything about how you experience the world. And so to forcefully put that separation of person with or I have, to suggest that you can be removed from it and still be who you are, first of all, doesn't feel authentic to a lot of people. And second of all, kind of suggests that there should be some sort of stigma, that you should want to be separated from that part of yourself. And it really can't be a part of yourself, because it's like, the analogy, I like analogies a lot. And the analogy I like to use is that, once, if you're going to bake a cake and it calls for flour, once you bake the cake, you can't take the flour back out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Autism is all through and chemically ingrained, if you will, into the person as they are. Now, there are recipes for flourless cakes, just like there are autismless humans. And those are great too. But you got to start from that.
So what would be exactly, that's what I wanted to ask you, because I've heard this before, and especially in the editing world, I would say 2 or 3 years ago, we were all, it's person first, only person first, make sure it's, And then a lot of people came up with like, no, like that's not how I identify myself. Like and specifically an editor that we work with, she identifies as a blind editor, and she's like, I'm not someone with blindness. I'm a blind editor, and that's what's comfortable for her. So, what is the best way to ask someone how they would like, what kind of language they would like to have used?
Um, Clearly, and just put it out there and ask so that they know what you're asking and you know what they're answering. Um, yeah, so
Perfect.
it's personal preference really, and it's understanding that whatever their preference is, somebody who prefers person first language doesn't necessarily disagree with it's.
Yeah.
And some people feel really strongly about it, and some people personally, I don't really, I don't, but I understand that other people do. And so when I speak publicly, I tend to use identity first around autism just because it's a best we know about 70-75% of autistic adults prefer identity first. So I
Hmm.
kind of do it on behalf of my peers, but um it all comes down to respect. So yeah, if you hear what they're using, you can reflect that back to them. If you're not sure, just ask.
Okay, perfect. I like that because I feel the nature of our work requires us to be mindful and tiptoe around things and make sure that we query in the best form possible. And sometimes asking for that clarity is very, very hard because we're so afraid of offending anyone. And so I like that these are the two options, or, how do you prefer? So I think that's giving yourself permission to ask these questions as an editor so that it's just clear communication with your client or with the author. So I think that's so important. One of the questions that and we can keep going on this, Lydia, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, and that I had when we talked about some of the questions we talked about today, was what challenges do neurodivergent writers encounter that editors might not be aware of, or what challenges do neurodivergent readers encounter that writers and editors might not be considering when we're doing this kind of work?
So this actually transitions really well from what we were just talking about because for authors, I think the primary thing is that clear communication. Particularly autistic people, but people who go around the world with a brain that functions differently, particularly someone, say, autistic, where communication is a fundamental part of those differences, they're used to being different. They're used to um people not getting them or people not, and so that's if somebody's coming to you and telling you that they're neurodivergent in some way, um they're aware on some level, right? And I would say
Yeah.
the first thing is when if somebody comes to you with that information, and now we're kind of jumping around, but the first thing is, great, what does that mean for you in this context? That's the first thing you need to know, because I always say, like, when my doctors, let's say, see if I'm meeting a new doctor and they see on my chart that I'm autistic, what does that really tell them that helps them? They have no
Mm.
idea what they're walking into still. So it's really what what does that mean for you in this context? Um, and then from there, sort of how you can support them, which we can get into in a bit. But those challenges they face, communication, but largely it's that people tiptoe around communication. That's the challenge. We're you know, be clear, be um put it out there. Don't be afraid to do that. And just not understanding what is meant. So, not being vague, not being subtle, is
One of
really
the things, yeah, that I like to ask when I'm working with neurodivergent writers, and it hadn't occurred to me to ask, what is that like for you? Or what is that like? But I do ask, what is the best way for me to give you feedback? Is
Hmm.
it going to be with, short paragraphs? Do you prefer a YouTube video? Do you prefer a book reference? And I tend to ask this of all the clients I work with, like, what's your learning style so that if I'm going to provide resources, what's going to resonate for you?
That's a
Um,
great idea.
and I found it to be really helpful because most writers who are neurodivergent will very clearly tell you, like they will latch on to that opportunity and be like, don't send me anything that's going to be over 2 minutes long. Don't send me anything that's going to require me to read a full-length book. I'm okay reading an article, but it has to be, and so they will give me these parameters that makes it so much easier for me to know, okay, I don't have to like go and like dig up all those resources and send them to them because that's going to be overwhelming. Like, what do I, and then with most authors, we work on a chapter by chapter basis. It'll be like, this is the whole scope, but then I'm only going to send you, like right now, I'm doing a cookbook, one chapter at a time for you to review the notes so that you don't feel that you have to look at 32 chapters. And so every client is different, but I definitely feel that asking those questions ahead of time makes my work easier and makes the relationship with the client also just streamlined for sure.
So I have a strategy that because I often the editing work I do is the writer I'm working with is neurodivergent. Um, and in some cases, like I edit these short stories for, well, he was a young man and we were both young adults when this started. It's been some years. Guess we're just adults now. But he, he's nonverbal or he's not conversational. I should say he's autistic. He's not conversational. He has an intellectual disability. And he writes these short superhero stories. And we're now, I mean, close to 15 years into doing this. So I'm still working through them. I don't know how many there are. I've never asked. Um, and
Lovely.
at this point, I no longer have to, mm, I can just 98% of it just make I mean, he uses completely non-standard everything about language, punctuation, spelling. It can be 8,000 words with no liner, no breaks, just a wall of words.
Hmm.
And I can get 98% of the way there without and just do it. I just know at this point it's been so long. And then he can review it, and if anything is ever not the way he wants it, they can tell me. But
Hmm.
starting off, someone who had no experience working with an editor, um, and this was long distance, 15 years ago when a lot of us weren't as used to that.
Hmm.
So I had to feel out what was going to be the best way to go about this. And so when I am working with someone who is neurodivergent and maybe isn't sure, and I'm not sure, and kind of nobody's sure what's going to work best for them, what I like to do, and maybe this is something this might be something everyone does, or it might be some, I don't know, as an editor, because I've just kind of fumbled my own way, but it seems to work well. I point out, I highlight the section, and in my comment will say, here's what I'm not getting. So, like, point out the problem that I'm having, or what I'm confused about, or what my question is there, what I think is not working. And then I always offer at least, I try to go for three potential solutions. It could be as simple
Yeah.
as, I don't think this word means what you think it means. That's not how I'd say it, but you know what I mean. I don't think this
Hmm.
word means what you think it means. Maybe we could try this word, this word, this word. And sometimes I expound on it and say this word would be funny because, or we could use this word would be like really dead on, or this word would connect back to this, or maybe you have another idea. And that starts to give me a sense of, it allows them to it's just kind of a full package of ways of addressing it, I guess, because there's that communication piece of, you know, someone whose disability affects the way they use language or process language, may have a really hard time, for example, understanding what isn't working or being
Yeah.
able to think of a way around it. Um, so sometimes those suggestions just kind of get their mind going. Sometimes you hit on something they love. A lot of times it just kind of gets them going or helps them see what you're getting at. And I do that to make sure my communication is covering all the sort of on the expressive and the receptive ends of communication, that we cover as many bases as possible.
And it gives them agency too, because at the end of the day, they still get to choose what's going to be the best option. And
Yes,
one of them might be something like you said that they weren't thinking about that can really improve on the tone or change the tone or make it funnier or scarier.
right.
So excellent.
So it's something I
Okay.
really like to do. Another thing I really like to do, because a challenge that comes up for a neurodivergent writer, executive function is a very common challenge with a lot of forms of neurodivergence. Our brains just work differently, right?
Hmm.
And again, someone with communication challenges, when you're dealing in language, sometimes the challenge of the language plus the executive function, it's a lot. There's a lot more behind the scenes work that's happening in that person's brain. Um, and so supporting the executive functioning. So that may look like creating a timetable or a schedule. We're going to do chapter 1, here's our target date, I'll send it to you this date, you send it to me this date, whatever. Maybe when you draw up that contract, um doing that. I am the world's biggest fan of color coding. So if I'm working like collaboratively in a document, um, and I do a lot of collaborative work in general with, again, course development, content. There's a very bright light over here. Um, Everybody has their own font color, you know. I always type in purple. Got a lot of purple going here. Um, Also, I use a lot of color coded highlighting. So those visual supports, when you can add in those additional layers, um, I also find using font, whether it's bolding, underline, breaking things up, realizing they're not going to stay that way at the end, but it supports, it gives the content a visual structure that supports the brain's processing as you're working on it. That can be really, really helpful and take some of that executive function burden off.
That's fascinating because I feel like when a lot of times when I'm doing work, I'm trying to keep it as minimalistic as possible as to not overwhelm the writer, but maybe there are certain contexts in which I can ask, would it help if I highlighted, for example, the problem sentences if there's not,
Yeah.
and so maybe we choose a color that something that needs to be rewritten or recast, I can just
Right.
highlight
Or
that
you could even
sentence.
say, I'm going to highlight in yellow places where I feel like you need more description, and I'm going to highlight in blue places I feel like we could
Right.
tighten or.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's a really great tool that hadn't occurred to me to use. And so we talked about the first question, which is what do we need to consider when we're working with neurodivergent authors? And first is how do they want to be addressed? And then what, maybe what kind of feedback or how they process feedback and what kind of feedback would be helpful to them. We also talked about what are things that we can do to ensure success, maybe when we're marking up a manuscript and I think it's really key to understand here is that we already know that every client is different, but then even more so here, every client has a different um, ability to process information
Right.
and to be really aware of that and to be able to clearly ask those questions. Do you, and this is totally off topic, but do you have like a checklist or anything that you might be able to recommend or that we could come up with, or any books where we might be seeing things that we could say, like, okay, this is like 3 things I should be asking, or 5 things I should look out for, or things that I could suggest. That's see like now I just created a new project for myself. Okay.
Don't.
That I'm gonna have to run by Lydia to see. Um,
Here.
so if we were trying to think about, okay, I have a new client that's come my way that wants to work with me. They've told me that they're neurodivergent. What are things, or what are like 3 or 4 things we could do as editors to ensure that the experience is going to be a success for both of us?
So these are all kind of not editing specific. It's broader than that. But first would be to, and I mean, you could spend a half hour doing this and come a long way. Uh, Whatever their, especially if they share more specific diagnosis or more specific, say, executive functioning challenges, if they tell you that, or whatever they share with you about their specific challenges or diagnosis, learn about that from people, directly from those people and those voices. Like,
Yes.
um, right. So, find the sort of little niche blogs that get 12 views where someone's writing about it. Find a YouTube video where someone's babbling. Find and listen to a podcast interview. Um, get a sense of what those experiences are like. They may not be super specific to that person, but just sort of get a little sampling, do a little perusal. But whatever it is, make sure it's not it's a first person perspective.
It's a lived experience,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Another thing I would say is whatever your genres are, there are neurodivergent writers who are succeeding there, or big names, or find out who they are, explore those, and see what work they're doing, and what they're talking about, and just see what's going on in your genres in those communities.
I love that. Yeah, the
There's
same.
overlap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the third one is to, the more, basically practicing acceptance in your everyday life. The more time you spend around people who aren't like you and don't think like you, and um yeah, the more time you spend interacting with them and comfortably communicating with them and seeing where they're coming from, and the better able you'll be to communicate with a neurodivergent client. And it doesn't even have to be someone who's neurodivergent. It's really just someone who's coming from, someone's got a brain that's a lot different from yours in some way.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember this is something that, so my book is I'm sorry, I've got a fidgety thing here.
Tell us
My
about your, can you link to the book in the chat, or I can try to find it actually.
Yeah, and I can also go grab it just to hold it up if you give me
Yeah,
one
show the cover.
second.
Yeah. I'll look for the book, and I'll post it in the chat as well.
So our book is and I have a co-author, Christina, who's not neurodivergent, but oh, hold on. I figured this out. I have to hold it in front of my face. This is Snoopers and Sneakers. Is it doing it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Perfect.
Okay. This is Snoopers and Sneakers. It's about two sixth grade girls. One of them is autistic and cat obsessed. She's not me, but those two traits for sure. Um, and it alternates perspective. And so um, it's really a lesson in perspective taking. Um, and I think adults can get as much from it as kids, because, when you're in Jane, the autistic character's chapters, you get to see her and her motivations and her intentions behind the things she says and does. And she makes a lot of sense. Kids love Jane. But then when you're in Ashley's chapters, and she's neurotypical, you get to see that Jane, when you aren't getting that inner perspective from Jane, she really just seems weird sometimes, or out of sync, or doesn't make sense. So you get to see the difference between what autism looks like on the outside and what it's like to actually experience it. And one of the important things in the book that we always point out when we do school visits is that the word autistic or autism is never mentioned. Autistic is mentioned once in chapter 1. You never find, Jane never tells another character she's autistic. You never know if anyone else knows that Jane's autistic, including Ashley. And that's because that's real life. Autistic people, neurodivergent people here, don't go around with it stamped on their foreheads. Half the neurodivergent people you meet don't know that they are.
Hmm.
So it's, when you're out to dinner and the kid in the booth behind you is having a meltdown because he only eats the one kind, only the McDonald's chicken nuggets, and these ones clearly aren't right or whatever.
Yeah.
Or it's people you meet in everyday life who just kind of seem weird. And the more that you're able to meet a person who seems weird and try to look at life from their perspective, or try not to jump to conclusions, or if you do, try to jump to 3 very different conclusions. Really think about people's different lives and experiences, and just the more, all the different ways people are that you can find to accept and make some sense of, the better you're going to be able to collaborate with someone who's neurodivergent, whose brain works differently than yours.
It's so amazing, and my family has totally been guilty of that. My nephew has severe ADHD, and of course, growing up, he's 10 now, but growing up, he was the difficult child. He's the one that doesn't have any boundaries. He's the one that the parents are not, and
We
and the
have we
minute
have one of those. He's 12. He's my nephew.
and the minute he got diagnosed, everybody was like, "Oh, we are in the wrong. We were always in the wrong. It was us not really paying attention." And just shifted everything, and everything, once we shifted our perspective and we created that space, it's affected all aspects of our lives, our relationships. Um, so yeah, it's the ignorance that a lot of us carry around that we haven't just been allowed ourselves or had the information to inform ourselves about this. So no, it's phenomenal.
So much of
And
it
and
is
I
like, one of the biggest ways it happens is really with communication. Neurotypical folks jump to a lot of conclusions about what people really meant by what they said. And
Yeah.
a lot of autistic in particular, but neurodivergent people, we're very used to, first of all, we mean what we say and we say what we mean. There is no what did you mean when you said I meant what I said. Um,
100.
but also, we are very used to being misunderstood. And so we don't read into what other people say as much. I always say there's about 1,000 less ways to be misinterpreted as rude by my autistic friends. Um, so when you are working with someone who's neurodivergent, if they're being blunt, if they're like they're being this, or if there's a way to take something that could be offensive, just don't.
Yeah.
Save
Yeah.
yourself a lot of energy. It comes up a lot, and yeah.
So Lydia, you're both an author and an editor, and you have this great book, which by the way, I got some copies for my Christmas wish list for
Oh, yeah.
my family friends. Yes, because I think it's such a great book. Can you tell us what it was like. I'd like to like explore the writing journey that you've had here with this book specifically. You started off, was the concept yours? I know that you have a co-author that you write with. Can you tell us a little bit about more what I'm looking for is the what's worked for you in the technical aspect of writing? So did you, we talked a little bit about the meetings that you have, or you mentioned to me on a previous call, the meetings that you have with your editor. What is the writing dynamic like between
Yes.
both of you when you're writing a project? I guess that's my
So, and
question.
we are finishing up the sequel here, which
Yay.
because so this book was 10 years of drafting, because we didn't know what we were doing, and rushing was not time was not the priority. And we were both working other jobs, and our dynamic, our approach is nobody ever does neither of we don't work independently whatsoever. So we both have to be available, and I'm going to work with her this afternoon. Um, but this book, Christina, my co-author, is 68. So I probably shouldn't say that. She's retirement age. Just to out myself, I'll be 38 on Tuesday. So now we're all even.
Great. No, don't worry about yeah.
We met okay, she was had a friend, and it was one of those, oh, wouldn't that make a great book with two girls, one who's like autistic, and Christina loves cats, so this cat obsessed autistic girl and this social butterfly who kind of loses her seat at the popular table, is the way we put it now. And who get kind of forced into a situation where they have to figure figure out how to work together in some way. So the friend, she had this idea with this friend who she no longer has any contact with. But the lady was like, oh, yeah, great idea. I don't actually want to write a book, though. And Christina kind of did. She's a journalist, career long journalist, wanted to write the book. I didn't know her at this point. This was like 2013, 2014. Um, she had a daughter who at the time was 11, 12 years old. Um, and Christina reached out to a group that hosts like social and discussion groups for autistic adults in the Pittsburgh area that I attended a few times in my like early 20s, but it was like all middle-aged men,
Hmm.
and stopped attending there. But this was about 5 years later. Christina reached out saying like, hey, I want to write this book, but I don't really actually know anything about autism. And I'm looking for someone who could talk to me a little bit about what it might have been like to be a 12-year-old autistic girl who was obsessed with cats. And multiple people were like, have you heard of Lydia Wayman? Because if there's one thing people know about me, like, I'm really obsessed with my cats. I have multiple cat things like within 6 inches of me here. So, but no cat on the cat tree, sadly. So, somebody told her, oh, I'll give me your email, I'll give it to Lydia and she'll reach out to you if she's interested. And she never expected to hear back. And I got an email and I was reached out to this lady, and my subject line was cat obsessed autistic girl at your service, because I was kind of like, I don't know what you want to know, but I guess ask me whatever. So we got together, and we always say, luckily, we hit it off better than Jane and Ashley. Um, and I started just reviewing her early chapters, um, more on like an editing basis. But pretty quickly, she asked if I wanted to be co-author, and like I said, that was like 10 years ago. So we really we our characters were always really solid. Our plot was harder. Um, we didn't even really know where we were going as we were working for a while. Definitely, we wanted the alternating perspectives. We write every single word together. Google Doc open that we're both looking at. I type. For me, trying to write without being the one typing is like trying to do a puzzle from across the room and directing someone. Um, one of
Great.
those
That's an excellent analogy.
fun neurodivergent brain things, I don't think in language. Language is, it's like translating my thoughts into words. So writing and typing is a much better form of communication for me when I'm communicating novel thoughts. I regurgitate well. I can get nice and practiced and everything and comfortable with concepts I've communicated multiple times, but newer things are harder. So at this point, Chris, I mean, we live on opposite sides of Pittsburgh, so there are bridges and rivers between us. And in Pittsburgh, that might as well be the Atlantic Ocean. We treat it, the rivers, like it's pretty much the ocean. Um, but she's his closest family at this point. Um, so the first book we it was slow. For the second book, we in our publishing process for the first book, we we always got everybody loved the characters. We had trouble getting an agent, and we would get so close. And we would sometimes use the little nuggets of feedback and the rejections to improve our manuscript. So making the plot
Mm-hmm.
move more quickly, for example, making sure the girls' voices were as distinct as could possibly be. Those were the two big things we picked up. But we eventually, our manuscript was with an agent for a year. She kept asking for extensions. And then she finally said, look, I really want it. But right when I was about to say yes, one of my current authors turned in a book that it's middle grade and has a disabled main character. And I was trying to figure out a way to say no so that I could say yes to yours. And I just can't. And I just have to say no. And we finally were like, look, our book is good at this point.
Yeah.
We're trying to find the needle in the haystack in terms of an agent. And in reality, the experience we want as authors didn't really require an agent. And we started looking at small presses and pretty quickly got a yes from Orange Blossom Publishing, small press in Florida. We've had a fantastic experience. Wouldn't change a thing. And we're contracted for the sequel. We've got we tell kids we've gotten a lot faster. We wrote it over the summer. Publishing's not faster. It won't be out until 2027.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the publishing route for sure. So what I'm hearing, Lydia, is that you've come up with a concept. For you, what works is meeting in person with a co-author and really like setting aside time to write as an accountability and as a feeding ideas off each other process. And then you are
Yeah.
the one that writes specifically.
I'm the
And
details person and she plants the forest, I trim the trees because I'm the editor, right?
yeah,
Between us. And so plotting and pacing and all of that, frankly, lost on me. You're lucky if I can tell you the correct order of events in our book. But I will remember that 3 years ago when we wrote a different scene in the lunchroom, Jane has a lunch bag and not a lunch box.
yeah, exactly. I love that. So this really showcases what we talk about so much at the networking studio, that sometimes working with a partner on a project can really streamline the process and make things go faster. I like what you acknowledged, the reality, because Brittany and I are both self-published authors, and after having seen what our clients go through, we decided we didn't want to go through the whole agent big publisher waiting game, and decided to self-publish. And what a hard journey it is to be able to get your book out there with a level of professionalism that you would expect from a big publisher, which is definitely doable, but it takes a lot of work.
It
And
does. And it depends on your genre because middle grade is probably the single worst niche to self-publish. Um, I have I self-publishing for Christina and I, every bit is valid and it all depends on what you want from what your goals are.
yeah,
But particularly for middle grade really limits you, particularly getting into
yeah.
schools. which is what
And
we
then I
love.
see all the crap that gets published through Scholastic. I'm sorry, but it's true. I see it at every single book fair, and I'm like, how is this stuff getting published, and why is my son having to buy this when there's so many other great books? So, before we go into our Q&A session, I want to mention to everyone here and for everyone who's going to listen to the recording later, make sure to ask for this book at your local library. Tell them that you'd like to read this book. Libraries will purchase the book if you ask them to. Give them the ISBN number. I'm going to share that in the meeting notes
Oh, thank you.
afterwards. So ask your local library. Recommend it if you have a connection at a school. Recommend it to your local school. We
We
are in the
love
season.
school visits, virtual.
Yeah.
Love to do them. So if anyone wants to
This is
point,
I think it's such, this book opens so many doors to so many different things. So, and a lot of times as indie authors, word of mouth is the way we get our books out. So I'm relying here also on the networking studio community to get the word out and maybe to get a copy to gift this holiday season to someone who you think would love a fun, entertaining story.
I'll share the chat to the our website link. I built our website. I am not a,
Perfect.
you
Yes,
know,
add it
it
in
does what
there.
it needs to do, but this link is to our author visit page in particular. Oh,
Wonderful.
I'm
And then because we're kind of on the hour, and this is all because a little bit of my fault that I started late, but are there any questions for Lydia? Anything that I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but I know not all of you are shy. Um, well, raise your hand if you do have a question. If not, I'm going to keep going and asking Lydia. Um, Lydia, I'm assuming, do you also do sensitivity reading for characters or scenes or settings that involve either characters that are autistic or that have autism in some
I've
capacity?
not, but it's something I'd love to do.
Okay.
Very much up my alley.
And would you recommend if we come across a manuscript where there is, because that's is what I would recommend, and what we tend to do here. A lot of us don't do sensitivity reading, but we do a lot of work with conscious language. So we tend to flag things that we're not experts in that might need to be revised by a sensitivity reader. So that would definitely be something that we should be flagging to, great, to
I
get
would
that.
say with disability, and maybe this is the case with sensitivity reading for every sort of area, I don't know, but it is very much the case for disability, autism. The there are some very different views. And so getting a sensitivity reader that align whose values and views align with that author is going to be important.
When did you know that you had a book in you? Because I'm assuming this wasn't 10 years ago. You probably knew a lot sooner than that. You strike me as
Always.
someone exactly. So, what could we do as editors? Maybe some of us work with younger clients, or some of us has family members that would like to tell stories. What would you recommend to do? How do we approach a project, or how do we encourage someone who might be neurodivergent that wants to write a book? What would be the best support we can give them to get started on their writing journey?
To tell stories. I encourage kids, all kids really, kids, so much of what it means to write, they get so much emphasis on the mechanics of it, and that can be such a barrier, whether it's just because they're young or because of a learning disability or neurodivergence or you name it. So encouraging them to think creatively and tell stories in whatever ways that means for them, whether they're, it's their Barbies are in soap operas, or whether my nephew does like comics. He draws a lot of comics to keep that storytelling and creativity element going and encourage that. They can get support on the writing side. That's what editors are for, right? Or even if there's just like a little person in your life take their story and turn it into a book for them. Show them the potential if that would
Exactly.
be encouraging to them, but don't let their limitations get in the way of a, a need to be creative or tell stories.